to everyone in the house. Want to open by, giving thanks and praise to that omniversal awareness that's known by many names, many people. God acknowledge the ancestors that are with us today, those remembered and forgotten. Want to honor the elders that are present today. Give thanks for your example of wise mind and knowledge. And with your permission, we're going to proceed. But I also want to big up the Free Your Mind team. They've done an awesome job. And thanks for being humble. Thanks for being humble to be a part of this. And I want to thank y'all for supporting those that are working to free the collective mind of humanity. So, yes, I'm Ras Ben, and have several projects in the works, one of which is a look at the mystical dimensions of Philadelphia. That's what I think got me to be a part of this. And so my presentation is around that today. It's called Free Your Mind and Your Mind Will Follow. And of course, it's inspired by the Free Your Mind conference, but it's also inspired by one of my favorite musical groups coming up, Parliament Funkadelic. Wow, somebody got a Funkadelic shirt on. That's awesome. Yes, I. But they had an album that I meditated on many years. Free your mind and your eyes will follow. The kingdom of heaven is within. And when I meditate on that, there's a profound truth in that title. And that profound truth is that the subtle informs the denser. So within our reality, the subtler parts of ourselves informs the denser part. So my mind, that's a subtler part of me. My as is a denser part. If I free my mind, my as will follow. But when we think about that in the context of freeing our mind, we got to kind of look at all the subtler aspects of ourselves, because our emotional body informs our physical body. Our mind, which is subtler than our emotions, informs our emotions. So if I want to inform my mind, if I want to impact my mind, I got to work with my spirit, which is the subtlest part of my being. So when we talk about spirit and spirituality, like the good brother Curtis said, there's been a lot of corruption. Religion has corrupted the ideas of spirit and spirituality. Some of us don't even want to deal with that part of ourselves. When we're talking about spirit, we're talking about our essential self, the life force energy that's within us. And that life force energy wants to be connected with the life force energy around us. And we could say, generally speaking, from the human domain, there's 3 realms of spirit we can connect to. One is an ancestral realm. The other is the realm of nature. And that embodies beyond just trees and bird and animal kingdoms. It also embodies the energy of the earth, the ley line grid network of the planet, the magnetic fields that envelop the planet. There's life force in all of that. And as well as the celestial realm, okay? All of these are realms of spirit that if we want to free our mind, we have to plug in, tap into, connect with those realms. So our indigenous ancestors had a powerful technology that they used to tap into those realms of the spirit, all 3 realms simultaneous. And today we call them the mounds. Mounds are usually sepulchral in nature, meaning that they're burial places. So when we go to the mounds, we can connect with our ancestors. Mounds are also usually built atop the ley line network of the planet. So when we go to the mounds, we tap into the energetic grid of the planet. And mounds are usually aligned with celestial constellations and astrological formations in the heavens. So when we go to the mounds, we can connect with that celestial realm as well. As we said, mounds are not just randomly placed. They're connected by a grid of ley lines. And collectively, we'll call this the global mound matrix. Now let's look at one indigenous account of these mounds and what they deal with. A great source to just, if you want a one-stop shop is the Chilambala, or the Prophecies of the Jaguar, which were chronicled by Mayan priests in the year 1541. And there is a chapter in the Chilambala called the Mound Builders. And I have emboldened, the meaty information, But they say it took 15 cartoons, we're going to decipher that, to construct the mounds. And that it would take 13 cartoons and 6 years to build one. And that the number of mounds, there were 15,400s of scores of the mounds. And that the mounds were built from the sea to the base of the land. In other words, all over, the mounds were built. So when we decipher this, and I really would say this is a post-alluvial account because it's my research has shown me that many of the mounds are antediluvian, pre-flood. But post-alluvial mounds took about 1,500 years to build. 75 cartoons. A cartoon is a score. Closest thing we know to is a score, about a 20-year period. 75 cartoons approximates 1,500 years. It took about 260 years to build one mound, which is 13 cartoons plus 6 years. And there are about 100, the Chilambala chronicles about 121,000 mounds being built. 15,400s were the scores, plus 1,000 more, 121,000. And where, we mentioned that, all over the land the mounds were built. So now, we're going to fast forward up to this time, what we call the mound gritters. Because those who are working to control the mind, those that are working to control the mind, they have paid a lot of attention to these mounds and this global mound matrix. And really the occult history of the United States is about these cats finding mounds and gritting them. Why? Because we already said the subtler informs the denser. If I want to control someone's mind, I got to cut off their spirit. So, like I said, yeah, these founding fathers, they put a lot of attention into finding these mounds and occupying them, building their edifices and their towers of power on top of these mounds, and then exerting their will throughout the global mound matrix. Y'all with me on that, right? Yeah. All right, so now who would these mound gritters be? They are the founding fathers, the sons of liberty that came out of the Green Dragon Tavern in Boston and would be known as the Green Dragon Order. So we know there's a lot of different Masonic orders, a lot of different secret societies. It's hard to name all the names, but my science tells me that these are the ones who are the mound gritters, the Green Dragon Order. So now, a mound gritter is someone who can identify an indigenous mound. They can survey, mark, and chart the connecting ley lines that extend from that mound. and then they can harness the energy from the earth, the chi, the ley line energy moving through and around that mound for their own will. So let's look at some historical figures. Let's look at some of these mound gritters and get insight into how they worked this thing magically. Okay, so we're going to start with Henry Adams. Henry Adams is considered the founder of the New England colony. He's also the founder of Boston. One of the first colonists to arrive from Europe. When he came, he got himself 40 acres near Boston and named it the Mount. Okay, a place called Mount Wollaston. But now the Adams, I have to say, they were very clandestine in their mound gritting. So a lot of the evidence around them is circumstantial. But there is something very important about Henry Adams that I think allows us to track the European roots of the mound gritting. And that is the memorial, the inscription on his memorial that says, "In memory of Henry Adams, who took flight from the dragon persecution in Devonshire, England, and alighted with his 8 sons near Mount Wollaston." So, these dragons of Devonshire, I can't get all deep into it. This is to drop that seed for you to do additional research. But the dragons of Devonshire were the mound gritters in England. Okay? And the story around them, there were actually 2 dragon orders. One that was a white dragon order that had Germanic roots. The other was a red dragon order that had Celtic roots. Initially, they battled one another, but then united and controlled the ley line grid collectively. And when we look at the coat of arms of London, we see that collective rule, the uniting of the red and the white dragons. Okay? And they would call the mounds and the chi force moving through the ley lines, they called that the dragons. And then I guess because they controlled it, they called themselves dragons. But also when you see the imagery of the dragon slayer, Michael slaying a dragon with a rod, sticking it into the earth. That's another symbol associated with these dragon mound gritters. So again, these 2 orders eventually united. And their unification, they called themselves the Green Dragon Order. But this is just intuitive and open to further research. But I feel like that Green Dragon Order is a code for the Blue Dragon Order, which is the order of the blue blood reptilians that we know are on top of the social hierarchy of this country. Okay? And that's the whole mystery of the red, white, and blue. That you have the red Celtic dragon order uniting with the white Germanic order to create a unified hybrid blue blood American dragon order. So that's, again, who, I think we can identify these guys as. So now let's keep looking at this Adams family. We'll go to John Adams, who was the great-great-grandson of Henry Adams. Very important founding father, Sons of Liberty. He co-wrote the Declaration of Independence. He was the first vice president, second president. Now, his residence, when he was vice president, he didn't live here in Philadelphia, which was the capital at that time. He lived in New York City at a place called Richmond Hill. Okay? And we don't have a picture of Richmond Hill, but his wife did include a description of it in a letter. And here it is here, where she describes, a mound intercepting the view of the newly formed New York City and the Hudson and Jersey beyond. But now, John Adams' role in mound gritting, he kind of nationalized the science of mound gritting by the mound gritting through the expansion of transportation and canals. Okay? And again, they're kind of clandestine. We're going to get to some more, like, yeah, this is some in-your-face mound gritting, but we start with the Adams family. And then we're going to seal up that family by looking at John Quincy Adams, who was John Adams' son. He became the 6th president. Once he completed his terms of office, he made this place, Meridian Hill Park. And if anybody's ever been to Washington, D.C., and have been to Meridian Hill Park and knows the significance of Meridian Hill, this is an older photograph of it. And this is the mound that Washington, D.C. is built around, okay? And this is where John Quincy Adams went to live after he served his term in the White House. And he affirmed those dragon roots of his family by giving a speech as Secretary of State. He proclaimed, "Americans should not go abroad to slay dragons they do not understand in the name of spreading democracy." So he's, you know, he's showing like his family, like we down with these dragon orders, you know. So let's get to some over-the-top mound gritting by looking at Thomas Jefferson and his Meridian Mound Madness, because Thomas Jefferson was obsessed with mounds and the global mound matrix. And many of his surveying and excavating he did as a scientist and researcher. It was all about the mounds, okay? And his residence was Monticello, which means little mound. And he had a smaller mound on his property that he scientifically excavated. He cut a stratigraphic incision into it and studied it layer by layer. Okay? And so he determined that the mound was created over hundreds of years. We read in the Chillum volume it would take about 260 years to make one mound. That it was built over hundreds of years, and that there were thousands of skeletons deposited in this mound. And his conclusions were that the contemporary indigenous of his time, which were the Algonquin, okay, all the Algonquin speakers, that they were the ones responsible for the mounds, and that the mounds were of considerable notoriety as a sacred burial space to the Algonquins of his time. So now, it was Jefferson who was responsible for naming Meridian Hill, Meridian Hill. And why did he name it Meridian Hill? Because as a son of liberty, he wanted complete autonomy from England. And that included scientific and not navigational autonomy. And all nautical, Navy, movements at that time had to base everything off the prime meridian, the zero meridian, when they were doing their mapping and navigating. So Jefferson said, hey, we're going to make the degree of longitude that runs through this mound, which is from the Greenwich meridian, 77 degrees. We're going to make this the prime meridian. And so he named this hill Meridian Hill. Okay? So now he aligned several things along that prime, what he hoped to be his prime meridian in D.C. He made this stone, he put the stone right here, which is very close to the Washington Monument. This is called Jefferson's Pier. This was the original intended place for the Washington Monument, but the land was too unstable to hold such a large obelisk. If they had put that thing if it was there when that earthquake happened a couple of years ago, the Washington Monument probably would have just come, it would have been like 9/11, the joint would have just come down, yeah, free fall. So, right, got Jefferson's Pier is aligned with that prime meridian. And also the center of the White House, the equestrian statue of Andrew Jackson, and the zero milestone, which is the zero reference point, the 0 point reference for all roads in the United States. All these things are aligned with this prime meridian of Thomas Jefferson. Also, in modern day Meridian Hill Park, they have an obelisk to mark the exact meridian line, as well as when they memorialized Thomas Jefferson, they put his memorial on this meridian as well. This is some images from Meridian Hill Park, and this is what used to mark the meridian. This galactic reference point. Okay, showing where the precession of the equinoxes were at that time. Thus, you being able to determine where planet Earth is in relation to the galaxy. So, this was the former Meridian Hill marker. Also along this meridian is 16th Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., where both the Masonic Temple and Scottish Rite Temple. So you see Thomas Jefferson in this meridian, very significant in the grid of Washington, D.C. And, Jefferson wanting to make the new meridian defined by a mound really reveals that the old, well, really it's the old and current, because we never really did make that switch. But the Greenwich Meridian is also built atop of a mound, which reaffirms this mound grid science was brought to the Americas by this Dragon Order. All right, so now let's kind of bring it here to Philly and someone else who openly studied the mounds, Ben Franklin. So Franklin, just like Jefferson, he openly studied the mounds. However, he disagreed with Jefferson in terms of who were responsible for the mounds. Jefferson felt the contemporary indigenous, the Algonquin speakers of their time, were responsible for the mounds. Franklin disagreed. He said the mound builders were an ancient people and that the Algonquin were just custodians, not creators. I think they were both right. So now, even though Franklin disassociated the Algonquin speakers with the mounds, he still felt that the mounds were very, very significant. And I think Franklin's relationship to the mounds are best seen by the emblem of another order that Franklin was initiated into in 1776. And that is the Order of the Nine Sisters. And when we study this, you see it's a temple built into a mound with 9 sisters around it, right? Anybody in Philadelphia knows what's up with this temple built on top of a mound with 9 sisters related to Ben Franklin, okay? Because the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which is on the Ben Franklin Parkway, it's a museum of art, but it's a temple to the muses of the 9 sisters of art, music, and culture, okay? So the Philadelphia Museum of Art was actually built on top of the most sacred temple mound of Lenape-Hoking, which we know of today as Fairmount. So Fairmount, when they say the Fairmount Park System, they're talking about the temple mound of the Lenape upon which the Philadelphia Museum of Art was built on. Okay? And of course, all of that area is kind of in honor of Ben Franklin. Okay? So now let's talk about this mound a little bit. And here is a picture of it before the art museum was built. This is actually, the picture is actually of the Philadelphia Waterworks, but you get to see the mound in the background. So this mound of the Lenape had a lot of lore and tradition associated with it. Lenape said that this earth mound was so sacred that whatever was done on it or around it, it was done with the full participation of the earth. Okay? So that's why Philadelphia is Shaksamatsen, Lenape-Hoking, the place where the kings meet, in the land where the elders of humanity live. So in other words, the Algonquin Federation, stretching north all the way up to the Wampanoags, going down to the Roanoke in Virginia and Carolinas, all of these Algonquin were federated, and Philadelphia, Shaksamatsen, was their indigenous capital. Why would they meet here? Because what they did here, they did with the full participation of the earth. And the Lenape were the grandfathers, the grandparent clan of the Algonquin. That's why Lenape-Hoking is the place where the elders of humanity dwell. So now, in the 1500s, Swedish merchants settled in Lenape-Hoking, and they would have solstice bonfires by the sacred earth mound. And they began calling this Fire Mount. When French merchants started coming to the area, they heard about this fabled Fire Mount and called it Montagne des Feux. Excuse my French, I probably tore that up, but y'all got the idea, all right? And so when the English heard from the French merchants about it, they called it Fairmount. And that's how it got the name Fairmount. All right? In 1815, they hollowed out the mound to house the Philadelphia Waterworks. They put large wooden barrels up top to use the gravity to create pressure in the plumbing system. So City Hall originally was a water source. It was a water house. Okay, that's why why you pay your water bill in City Hall even to the day. This is the historical root to that. And why you can't put no other name on the water bill than who owns that property. That's tied into the Philadelphia Waterworks. And Fairmount was made the reservoir. So in 1928, the museum was built on top of the defunct waterworks and hailed as a temple to the 9 Muses. And Ben Franklin was given nomenclature over the whole parkway. Okay? So, just to show you something mystical, and this is something that the local Order of Rosicrucians here in Philadelphia point out with kind of like pride. You know, they say this is a good thing, but they say that the mound started out sacred to the earth from the Lenape, that the Swedes made it a fire mound. It became a holder of water under the English, and then finally sealed up as a repository of the air element, being a museum, and the muses associated with the air element. So now, what did Ben Franklin do to earn nomenclature of that whole parkway, Franklin Institute, all the things, Eakins Oval, all that around there. Ben Franklin, his name is really associated with all of that. It was Franklin's manipulation of Lenape affairs in 1754 at the Albany Congress that earned him the naming of this most sacred part of Philadelphia. Because Franklin was able to convince the Haudenosaunee, who had been misnamed the Iroquois, to not ally with the Lenape against the British. That the Haudenosaunee were fighting the French, and Franklin said, hey, if you don't align yourselves with the Lenape, we won't align ourselves with the French. You can align with us, and we're all good. But the Haudenosaunee didn't know that Franklin was working with the French also. And so it was a divide and conquer technique that we've heard how to divide and conquer. And so when the Haudenosaunee didn't align with the Lenape that more or less forced their exile out of this land. So now, let's look at some of these edifices that they put on the mounds. Because these mound critters, they deep. Because what they'll do is the edifices that they put on top of the mounds that they conquered, the edifices will be particularly like disrespectful and offensive and defiling to the ones that them conquered. Okay? But before we even get to the deepest one that's directly related to the Lenape, we gotta look at this statue right here. That now the temple to the Muses has two entrances. One for the immortals, which is the one when you run up the rocky steps. We mortals, we don't go through that entrance. All right? The entrance for mortals is on the backside. And on the backside is this statue. It's called Social Conscience. And I know there's room for interpretation of art. But when I look at, this is the creepiest statue I've ever been present of in my life. And when you study it, really what it is it's two Nephilim, two giants, two watchers, sucking the life force essence out of two humans while a third, the next victim, watches helplessly and powerlessly. Okay? So this dude is actually sodomizing this one, hitting him from the back, and he's in pain. Okay? This dude is sucking his essence out from his neck. We know they say, where do vampires get you? In your neck. And again, there's a lot of room for interpretation. It's art, but here's another assignment. Go to this. How many of y'all who's seen the statue? Creepy.
There's a 10-year-old that was scared to go there.
Yeah, it's a creep. Yo, the vibe is on there. So now, they are memorializing sodomy and vampirism with the full participation of the earth. What we do here happens with the full participation of the earth, right? But now the deepest edifice is the equestrian statue of George Washington at Eakins Oval. And what this statue embodies and memorializes is the assassination of the queen goddess Winona, who's the queen goddess of the Lenape, wife of Chief Tammany, who signed Penn Treaty and the ultimate subjugation of the Lenape. Okay? So you see, the Lenape are, they're disarmed, they're laying down on their back. All of the indigenous animals just, they're chilling. They're not standing up. They're not on guard. And here you have Goddess Queen Winona with two colonists approaching her, one with a wreath in one hand, the other tipping his hat, so that they're coming in honor, but they both have cloaked daggers. Here's an image of the cloaked dagger. Okay? Tipping his hat in one hand, cloaked dagger in the other. And why did they have to assassinate Goddess Queen Winona? Because it was the Council of Grandmothers that granted land charters. And so there was a cultural clash where the early colonists wanted to sit down and have rum and talk to the men, smoke tobacco. Come on, Tammany. Tammany's name means easy to talk to. And the tradition of why Tammany was easy to talk to is because he had intercourse with a divine being. Well, who was he having intercourse with? His wife, who was the Queen Goddess Winona. And she was the ultimate decision maker on who would be granted land. And it was, the Lenape had no problem granting land, but I think they were not trying to give up shots of oxen. They weren't trying to give up this piece of land where we're actually on it right now. This, all of what was Penn's Philadelphia, all of this, what happens in Penn's Philadelphia happens with the full participation of the earth. This Free Your Mind 2 conference is happening with the full participation of the earth. We're right here. But they wanted this land. Specifically, Queen Goddess Winona was like, nah, y'all not getting this. And they assassinated her. They actually didn't do it with daggers. The research, and I do need to say that this is a reflection of collective research. An elder named Mama Gail Clouden and a next brother named Ampu Galilee. Us three are the ones who came up with a lot of this information, okay? But they didn't actually assassinate her with the daggers. They asked to meet her in the Wissahickon at where the Mashonee and Wissahickon Creeks meet, and they pushed her over a cliff, which is the very first lover's leap. So yeah, you know, every state has a lover's leap, right? Where some queen goddess, indigenous, fell over because of either some spurned love or something, right? Those are the needles in the haystack to hide the first lover's leap, which reveals this darker part on how this nation was birthed, the assassination of the Queen Mother. So now there's two other statues near Eakins Oval, which shows what happened to the Lenape after the assassination of the Queen Goddess. The Lenape woman was left to fend for herself with her child. And the chiefs negotiated the settling of the seaboard. So you see him seated with his pipe, with the colonists towering over him. Okay, so now why Penn Treaty? Why didn't they just Brody this land? Why did they have to have Penn Treaty? Because what happens here happens with the full participation of the earth. So by having Chief Tammany sign over the land, they earned providence because even the earth had to acknowledge the agreement. Y'all with me so far? All right. So now, we said that this George Washington equestrian statue, you know, it marked a very deep spot. So George Washington is another one of these mound gritters. And yeah, we gotta call this man Commander Necrogeomancer as far as this mound gritting science, and we're gonna show you why. But I do want to point out before we even get into that the first 6 presidents, all of their homes were mounds and identified by name. So George Washington, his home is Mount Vernon. in Virginia. John Adams, we mentioned he's in Richmond, New York, his residence. Thomas Jefferson was Monticello, the Little Mound. James Madison, 4th president, Mount Pillier, the Mound of the Pilgrim, where UVA is currently. James Monroe, oh no, I'm skipping myself. James Monroe had Monroe Hill. That's where UVA is currently. And then we mentioned that John Quincy Adams lived at Meridian Hill. So you see George Washington follows this pattern of living atop of a mountain. And here's a picture of Mount Vernon. You see you got something mystical happening with that circle, I feel. All right, so now, Commander Necrogeomancer. Why? And that's connected to where we are right now. So you know we're about a block from Independence Hall, where this nation was birthed, right? And you got, right behind Independence Hall, you got a Commodore Barry statue. We're going to talk about the significance of that. But then diagonally across, you got Washington Square. And those that know the history of Philadelphia, Washington Square was one time called Congo Square, because it was the first public place that Africans could meet. And the reason why Africans could meet there publicly in Philadelphia is because it was a burial ground. Okay? And there's over 2,000 revolutionary soldiers and free and enslaved Africans buried in Washington Square. But we're going to focus on these war veterans, because these war veterans are actually used as an ancestral army in this control of the global Mound Matrix. And George Washington is the commander, Necrogeomancer, General-in-Chief. Okay? So now, Washington Square is also known as the Congregation of the Dead. And in the plaque that honors the 2,000 plus soldiers that were buried there, you know, and here's the inscription of it right here. And John Adams, who we said is a Mound Ritter, he visited here, and his visit to this Congregation of the Dead has also been inscribed. And at Washington Square, you have a Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, as well as an eternal flame burning. Okay? If y'all on your lunch break and you want to just check it out, it's like only 2 blocks from here. Okay? So now, why is Washington Square important? And why did they set up the Commander Necrogeomancer there? Because Washington Square is 1 block from the keystone that's on the Stonehenge ley line. Meaning, there's this ley line, those energy lines that run the planet. There's this ley line that runs from Stonehenge straight down the eastern seaboard of the U.S. So Boston, New York, Philly, D.C., Richmond, Charlotte, Atlanta, all of them are aligned on this major ley line. And the keystone, a hinge is what? A hinge, dual meaning. One is those large monolithic stone structures, but a hinge is also a lock, right? We're in the keystone state. So I feel on mystical levels, the keystone unlocks that Stonehenge ley line. And so that's why those Mound Ritters came looking for this area. And Washington Square is 1 block from it. Where is the keystone ley line? Oh, before I even go there. Yeah, because Philadelphia and the world grid, Philadelphia is a very significant node on the worldwide grid. 6 ley lines converge right here, a couple of blocks from here, where this keystone is. And where is that? The Commodore Barry statue right behind Independence Hall. So this nation was birthed, all right, Penn Treaty, Shaxamoxin was granted to the colonists with the full participation of the earth. Then right here, where the 6 ley lines converge in the city, the United States was born with the full participation of the earth. Okay? And the place that marks this ley line convergence is the Commodore Barry statue. Now, it's my understanding it's actually a flag stone somewhere in the earth. That's the exact mark. The Commodore Barry statue is just a common reference. Okay?
What direction is he pointing?
I think he's pointing southwest maybe? No, it might be southeast.
I think southeast.
Southeast. He's pointing in the southeast. So here's an aerial view of the convergence point. And again, this is 1 block from it, where you got George Washington set up as Commander-in-Chief of the Congregation of the Dead. So now, networked, affixed, laid on top of the global mound matrix is this Congregation of the Dead. And all around the nation, Washington, if you got a Washington memorial or a war memorial or something like that, and like you study it and it's like, wow, this looks like kind of an odd place for a war memorial. It's probably a mound. And it's probably a part of this Congregation of the Dead that's been placed on top of the global mound matrix as an ancestral army to keep that spirit under wraps. Okay? So here's a classic example. Anybody that's familiar with East Falls? This is a war memorial in a residential neighborhood next to a water treatment facility. Strangest place in the world to find a war memorial. It is a pentagram of 5 cannons pointed into the ground. Why would you point 5 cannons in the shape of a pentagram into the ground? The pentagram's inverted because we're looking at the front of the memorial. That 5th cannon is behind it. That's why you can't see it. So they got a cannon, they got an inverted pentagram built with cannons pointed into the earth. Explain that to me. Okay? Here, this is in Richmond, New York. It is a soldier standing on top of a mound. Okay? And I haven't scienced this. Maybe my New York friends can help me. John Adams' Richmond was near Greenwich Village, but I see there's a whole Richmond Hill, New York, that's in between Queens and Brooklyn. So I don't know how there became 2 of them. This is in D.C. This is Fort Stevens. I grew up not far from here. Fort Stevens, this is where Lincoln, it was the first assassination attempt on Lincoln was here. I think they wanted to spill his blood into this ley line matrix here at Fort Stevens. And he was saved by someone, yelling at him, "Get down, fool!" But here at Fort Stevens, 84, 12 times 7, 84 Civil War veterans are buried here. And this is another residential neighborhood. This isn't like downtown, Smithsonian area. This is like homes and stores and, things like that. So now, forts is another thing where they feed this Congregation of the Dead. This is Fort Mifflin, only fort in Philadelphia. You look at it, it's like a pimped out pentagram, like a pentagram and a sigil all in one. And they got living history calendar where every year, and this is where Fort Mifflin is on the ley line grid of the city. So you can see it's on the ley lines of Philadelphia. But every year they have these war reenactments. Okay? And these war reenactments, this feeds that ancestral energy. Okay? That keeps that army of the Congregation of the Dead strong and vital. Alright? And if you think like Ross Ben is just like tripping or made this stuff, no. Fort Mifflin actually profits off of the presence of this Congregation of the Dead there by having these paranormal Fridays. And you could come and experience the ghost and hang out with the ghost and hear their voices and feel their presence, you know. So this is a tangible part of this necrogeomancy. Okay? And this is ultimately what Columbia, the mystery of Columbia, is about in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to move real quickly because like Columbia is supposed to be the feminine name of this country, but it's also an invocation of Virgo. And that Virgo dynamic, that's what rules mutable earth. This whole science is around mutable earth, okay? Here's a symbol of Columbia. You see she's sitting on the earth, marking her spot with a pole, okay? And, right, the Washington Monument is kind of pimped out with a pentagram. Here we got this inverted pentagram happening on a grander scale in D.C. And so D.C. is a major trigger point for this geomantic network. And D.C. got a lot of Virgo energy. It was named Columbia on September 9th, which is in Virgo. Banneker Stone was laid when Jupiter was in Virgo. The moon was in Virgo when the White House cornerstone was set. Mercury and the sun were conjunct in Virgo when the Capitol was laid. And the moon was in Virgo when the Washington Monument was set. So they're using this Virgo energy. This is all about controlling this global mound matrix. And that's what the Novus Ordo Seclorum is also a reference to that. All right? So to seal this thing up, to free our mind, we got to tap our spirit. And those who know we have to tap our spirit has done a lot of research, put a lot of time, energy, and effort into controlling the global mound matrix, because that is designed for us to easily tap into our spirit. So what do we have to do? We got to free our mounds, and our minds will follow. Okay? So we got to first find the mounds. Most urban centers are built on mounds. Find the mounds in your vicinity. And then we gotta go, we gotta free up these mounds. We gotta put our spirit, our love, our ashe into these mounds. We gotta feed them ancestors that are in there. Like, yeah, just like y'all wanna be free, we wanna be free. Right? And if we do this synchronized, if we say new and full moons, sunrise and sunset, we're going to do this thing collectively. We will impact the collective mind of humanity. We will quicken the reaching of the critical mass of consciousness. That 100th monkey effect, where we got, like right now, all of us here ingesting all of this powerful information that we heard yesterday, that we're going to hear today and tomorrow, and we're doing it with the full participation of the earth. Yeah, we're impacting humanity. Don't underestimate the value of your presence here. They say each one of us is in morphic resonance or light vibration with about 12,000 other people on the planet. Our genetics, our phenotype, our vibes are like enough that when I think, I influence them and vice versa. So, when we come onto this global mound matrix, new full quarter moon, sunrise, sunset, free our mind, tap our spirit, honor the ancestors that are there. We're going to quicken the freeing of the collective mind. So thank you all for letting me share. I hope you found it. Have a good day.